So when I was in high school, I remember we got called into the auditorium and I had no clue why. I was like, okay, we're all going to the auditorium in high school. And they said that they had a special guest that was coming to speak to us. And I was in a math class and I was like, okay, it must be a math teacher or something. I had no clue what I was really walking into. And when we walked into the auditorium at my high school in Boone, North Carolina, Watauga High School, shout out to Watauga. This guy was standing there with this tattoo sleeve and a bottle of water or a bucket of water, and was just like, okay, this is really weird. This guy doesn't look like a math teacher at all. And he started sharing to me and all the students there about this organization called Wine to Water that he started, and about the work that he was doing in the world. And I think what really stuck out to me in this work that he was doing was that, like, he wasn't saying that you had to be this perfect picture of someone or this saint or all these things to be able to make a difference in the world. And he spoke about this, the issues of water and how he was bringing clean water to the world in his own unique way. And his name was Doc Henley. And after I heard that, I left that auditorium and said, I want to be involved in this. And I knew I was going to graduate high school and go to college and play baseball at Western Carolina. And I was like, I'm going to go when I leave school and start a chapter, because I got to talk with Doc after he talked, and he shared about how you can do this thing in college. There's been a couple of people that have done this. So I went down to Western Carolina and started this chapter and just really got involved in Wine to Water. And it really became a passion of mine to find ways to raise awareness about the world's water crisis and also bring clean water to people. And even if it was the smallest way, at Western Carolina. And I know after I left Western Carolina, I went to Holy Cross College to play baseball also, and brought it up there as well, because I just felt like there was this calling in my heart, this stirring to go out and serve those, especially in the field about water. And from there, I really got to see hands-on what Wine to Water was doing when I went to Uganda. So when I went to Uganda in my junior year of college, I teamed up with Wine to Water and talked about how can we go see some of the work that you're doing there. And they had an organization, a partnership in Uganda. And we went onto the ground field and saw some of the work that they were doing with the filters and the clean water, ceramic filters and everything like that. And it was just like one of these things that I was just like, how in the world do all these people in Uganda not have clean water like we do in the United States? And I went home and knew that I wanted to do something different. I knew I wanted to go overseas and serve in a way that was bigger than myself, something that, like, I knew I wasn't going to be able to fix. But I wanted to get involved in it in some way. And that's really how I ended up going to Jamaica to serve for a year. But it really stemmed from this organization called Wine to Water. And that's really what inspired this heart for service in me. So if you would have told me when I was in high school, before that math class, that I was going to care about serving people in clean water, I would have laughed at you. But after that math class, I remember being like, this is where I'm being called. I'm being called to serve those around me, especially those that are most marginalized. And today, you're probably wondering why I'm talking about this organization and what this has to do with this podcast. But today we have a special guest with us, and he's one of the people that was really at the forefront of bringing the college experience and to Wine to Water and figuring out ways to make Wine to Water accessible to young adults and continue growing the Wine to Water organization. And we have the COO here today, Josh Elliott, who is here to just kind of talk more about Wine to Water and the work that they do to give you a better glimpse, because my version was very rough around the edges and didn't really explain everything that they do. But Wine to Water is here, and they're going to be talking with us about how they're being protagonists of change now, today, and tomorrow, and in the future. So Josh, if you could share a little bit about yourself and explain a tad bit more about Wine to Water.
Yeah, thanks, Max. First off, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to talking to you. Wine to Water, it's funny. I listened to your story and I was like, is this my story? Is that Max is telling? I'm like, I had the exact same story. I wasn't in high school, I was in college, but I had a very similar experience. Heard about this crazy organization, Wine to Water, and was like, I want to be a part of that. Like, what do I got to do? I want to come and help. And my version, if you will, and they're eerily similar, is I heard similarly a doc speak at the university and talk about this world water crisis that at the time it was close to 1 billion people with a B don't have access to clean water around the world. And I was in college classes and I was like, how are we not talking about this right now? Is this guy even for real? And, lo and behold, Doc, a few years earlier had himself come up against this staggering statistic that around the world, over a billion or almost a billion people don't have access to clean water. And, this was about 2004 range. He actually, started to do some research. He was a bartender at the time in Raleigh, North Carolina, found out about this huge issue and was like, well, I know how to pour drinks. I serve at the bar every night. Maybe I can get my regulars to come in and, hopefully continue to drink a beer, but maybe throw a couple extra dollars towards this cause that all of a sudden I didn't know was so huge. And so, long story short, Doc was able to do some pretty successful events, called them wine to water events there at his bar, and was raised some considerable amount of money. And over time figured out, all right, I got to find somewhere to put this money. And found another organization actually here located in Boone, North Carolina, and took the money to them and said, hey, I just want to give you guys this money and make sure that it goes to water. Like, that's what I'm passionate about. And those are a huge issue. I know nothing about doing this work, but I'll give you the money because it sounds like you guys know what you're doing. And, he was actually able through that relationship to get the opportunity to experience firsthand what the water crisis is. And so our beginnings as an organization, Wine to Water, started actually in Darfur, Sudan in 2004. And so, there, Doc's actually spent a year there doing a lot of well rehabilitation in the desert region of Darfur during a pretty crazy time of government enforced genocide and unfortunately some very, very tough stuff. But fast forward, Doc came home and, over the past little over a decade now, we established the organization in 2007. I personally came on board with the organization in 2009 as a volunteer. And now today, just this past July, we were able to reach our millionth person with clean water. So to date, we've worked in over 46 countries, and we currently have 5 international offices, Nepal, Colombia, the Dominican Republic, and Tanzania, and then here in the U.S. So we're excited to be here, tell you more about the organization, but that's just a little bit about us. And, at the end of the day, our purpose is just to love on people and ensure that they got the basic needs, which is water, to live a better life.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Josh. And I know in our church, we have Pope Francis, who speaks a lot about these justice issues, these issues of the environment and all these things. And in his encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis says this: access to safe, drinkable water is a basic and universal human right. Since it is essential to human survival and as such is a condition for the exercise of other human rights, our world has a grave social debt towards the poor who lack access to drinking water because they are denied the right to life, consistent with their inalienable dignity. This debt can be paid partly by an increase in funding to provide clean water and sanitary services among the poor. And I think just hearing our Holy Father talk about how water is at the center, should be at the center of some of the work that we're doing, because without water, kids aren't able to go to school. They're not able to find safe housing, all these things. Like, water really is an essential thing. We all need water to survive. And I think a lot of times we don't recognize that. And I know here in Houston, Texas, we just experienced a little bit of this, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But when we lost water during this winter storm, you saw people scrambling, trying to figure out, how do I survive? And this is an everyday occurrence that happens across the world. And I think that's something that really stuck with me after this experience, is like, how can I do something and bring this fire back? Because I think through my work, like, I've done many other things, but like, water is still at the core and the essential part of like how we survive. And there's all these ways that we can get involved in bringing clean water. But some of the things that I do want to talk about, especially with this organization, Wine to Water, who's working to do this clean water work around the world, is talk about how the work that they do really falls in line with some of the teachings in our church. And so, as many of our listeners have heard, we have these things called Catholic social teaching. And it's a list of 7 things, sometimes 9, depending on which list you're looking at. But I want to dive into a few of these and talk more about how Wine to Water lives these out every single day, because I think Their organization is truly embodying what our church teaches and tells us to do. And the first one, I think, is very basic, but I think it really embodies what Josh was kind of sharing at the end there, that they're there to love people and make sure people have that right to clean water. And the first is human dignity. And how does your organization, Josh, I guess, with this word human dignity, when you hear that, what does that mean to you and your organization when you hear the word human dignity?
So it's such a cornerstone, Max. So our mission statement is to support life and dignity of all through the power of clean water. So it's not to drill wells. It's not to just do water work. It's to use that as a catalyst to support life and dignity of all. And I was struck by the quote that you shared there from Pope Francis, that last bit, inalienable dignity. I personally did a lot of wrestling with this in the past few years as we refreshed our mission statement, because we have over the years. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is, there's two schools of thinking with dignity. There is, I can give you dignity. And oftentimes I think we go into just dignity and understanding as this something that you can impart to someone. And what we try to live out and what our mission is not to impart it, is to give it, because it is not something that we can give. It is truly there. It's always there. You are born with it. And so our purpose and our work is just to recognize it, is to name it, and is to uplift it and amplify it. And so I think it's a slight shift in the thinking around dignity. But for us as an organization, we're always looking at and trying to hold ourselves accountable to the work that we do, and to say, hey, we're not coming in to save anyone. We're not coming in to bring dignity. It's there. If anything, it's our job to use this small, piece of the equation to build a better life with water, is to recognize it and ensure people in themselves see it. It's funny. It's kind of like water. It's there under the surface. It sometimes just needs to be tapped. And, for us as an organization, in every way, how we grow our team, how we do our work, not just the type of work, but how we build in a community, it's all around that idea of ensuring that we are recognizing dignity, not bringing it to these places.
That's awesome. I really like that, just understanding of that it's not something that we can go in and just give. I think a lot of us get caught up in that. We need to go there and we need to give the dignity. We need to do these things. But it's there already. There's nothing that we need to do. They've been born with dignity. God gave them that dignity when they were born. And I think to just realize that is such a powerful, and transforms the way you think about just all these social issues that go on, especially water. And I think with that changing the way that you think about this thing of dignity, I think it really becomes something different when you start talking about all these things. If someone's already given dignity, there's nothing you can bring. So there's this next term that we use a lot in our church called this preferential option for the poor and vulnerable. And basically what that is you see the dignity of the poor and vulnerable as the most important in the work that we're doing. And all of our decisions as an organization, as a government, as a policymaker should have the poor at the center of that work that we're doing. And how does your organization, I guess, experience that, especially with this transition of saying these people already have that dignity, we're going to keep them at the center? How does your organization do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to answer that, but first kind of give some context and honestly take some responsibility. And I'd say primarily us in the West, in the developing world, is we haven't done this right in the past, and we have a lot of work to do to climb out of that, that bad history, it's specifically even in the aid world, around thinking that we have all the solutions. And it's not even half wrong. It's all wrong, right? We don't have all the solutions. And I think just starting there is the first step, right? And so for us as an organization, practically what that means is, for example, in Nepal, where we do more comprehensive community wash work, we don't do any technical infrastructural changes until we've sat down with the community members and listened, asked questions, ensured that we understand truly what they see as the problem and where their values lie, and to ensure that it's not a project, but that it is a partnership. It's something that we are coming alongside with them to do and to build something better. And so, for example, what that means is, ensuring that we're establishing a local governance system. So before we put any water infrastructure on the ground, that we're working with local leaders and empowering them to say, hey, this isn't ours. We want to work with you to build something that is going to be yours, and not just here during the project, but for generations to come. And so ensuring that they have that recognition from the beginning, and that they are a part of that building, of that solution, and even the work itself, then it becomes something powerful. That's the true key to sustainability, right? And lumped into every step is the recognition of that dignity at the personal level, at the communal level, and then in turn we get that it's like a mirror, right? Like they give that back, and that there's that relational part that in some ways is healed, because frankly, a lot of the folks that we work with, that is not how it's gone for them. In some cases, we're coming back to fix old issues of organizations who have come in and completely breezed past that. So for us, it's not about more. It's about how can we use this work to heal and also empower those generations to come with the work. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but that's sort of what comes to mind when you say preferential option, because you could zero in on the community with the most people, but that isn't the way that we work. We want to zero in on those who are most vulnerable and ensure that they have first preference, literally. So.
I know that's awesome. I think like what I loved about everything you were saying there, this ties in all these. So a lot of times we break Catholic social teaching up to like, oh, this teaching. Like what you just shared there shows that like these all tie in together. Like you talked about solidarity, like to be in solidarity with your brothers and sisters, to hear their cries, because the only way you can do this preferential option for the poor and vulnerable is to know what they need, to hear them, to be able to listen to them. And I think your example there just showed that. And the other thing too is just like you're talking about how we're working at the most basic level. We're working at the most basic level to figure out how these local communities can make sure that they get clean water and it's sustainable and it stays there. And that goes to this teaching called subsidiarity, which is solving the problems basically at the most basic level. And you dove into that. And then you said like everyone has this right to clean water, to education, all these things, but you also give them a responsibility to take part in it too. Y'all are not just going in there saying, we have the answer for you, we're going to build this. You let them be a part of it. And I think this rights and responsibilities is really powerful, is because like you have the right to water, but we also want you to be responsible for being able to take care of it and make sure it stays here with you. So I think like that one answer really like encapsulated like all these questions that I had. And I think, but what I really want to dive in here though, is a little bit more about this like most local level thing. I think you kind of explained like we work with the leaders and everything, but like, what does that look like on like building clean water? Like you build a community, a local community that cares about water, but like, is there an accountant? Is there someone that like knows how to work on water? Like, how does this all work? Like, can you dive in a little bit more about that for us?
Yeah. I mean, this has been an evolution for us as an organization. And I think it's just natural. Like as you grow as an organization, you have to figure out how do you scale and continue to do good work and stay true to your values and your mission. And I will say that for us, I think it would be worth mentioning that, about 5 years ago, it became very clear to us. This was right around the time we actually established that new mission statement to hold ourselves accountable. We realized that, in the past, we had done a lot of partnership work, and it had been in spurts and shoots here and there in different parts of the world. But we realized, okay, if we're serious about supporting life and dignity of all through the power of clean water, and we want to, there's this thing that we talked about is like, we want to not just go broad, we want to go deep in the figurative sense, but also in the literal sense. And what that meant for us is like, we've got to establish local teams on the ground that are not just someone who is a project manager for 6 months to get this community project done, but to actually empower leaders from the ground to be a part of organizational leadership and be a part of this work, because we recognize we don't have all the answers. We don't have all the solutions. So for us, it was like, all right, we've got to do that. And so what that ended up looking like was establishing, the 5 offices or the 4 international offices that I mentioned. Roshni Karki is our country director in Nepal. She actually helped us respond right after the earthquake. And so really quick, I'll share a story about what this kind of looks like. So if you're not familiar, 2015, the earthquake hits, depending on who you're talking to in Nepal, 7.8, 8 point on the Richter scale, like massive earthquake that it started, I believe it was on the east side of the Kathmandu Valley and rolled across, and roughly, 20,000 people, are affected, if not injured and killed. And, we as an organization who does long-term programming sometimes do relief work. But in an instance like that, you see it on the news and you're like, man, I wish I could do something. But oftentimes you don't know exactly where you can. And it's funny, we had a guy come in here in Boone, North Carolina, who was at App State and said, hey, I'm from Nepal. I'm flying back tomorrow. Can you guys help me? And we're like, yeah, let's go. So we got him a bunch of filters, actually some filters I think that you guys are going to get your hands on here in a couple of weeks, and flew him back to Nepal. He got on the ground, and with his local team of friends, colleagues that he knew in Nepal, I think there was roughly like 8 or 9 of them. They all had motorbikes. They all distributed the filters and went up into the hills, like the foothills. And when we say foothills in Kathmandu, that's like 8,000 feet up. So a little different foothills than we're used to here in the Appalachians. But they got out, were able to reach over 20,000 people with clean water like that. And we didn't even step foot over there. And not saying that it's better or worse, but you've also got huge organizations like the Red Cross and others who come in and drop in, and they do amazing work. But I think what we realized was that is how we want to grow and build impact, is through those local leaders, because their networks, their understanding of the cultural nuances of the region, and the recognition of here is the greatest need. We can never know that sitting here in our chair. And if anything, we need to find those people on the ground to empower, serve ourselves. And so, for us, what that came, one of those people was Roshni Karki. And so Roshni, over the past 5 years, has established a full-fledged office. She has accountants, and she has an education team. She has an engineering team. And they're all just beautiful, amazing, passionate people that do amazing work. And if anything, what I'd like to pin it up in sort of a bottom line, the way we view it is, here in the US, we serve them. They are the leaders on the front lines doing this good work. It's not that they report to us. In some ways, like we serve them in that. And the more that we can empower them and give them the resources and the latitude to go and do good work, the sky's the limit, right? They're going to always overshoot the expectations, and they have so far. And that's just Nepal. I'd say it's true in every one of our regions. I will say it's messy. You got to figure it out, but it's always worth it. And we've time and again felt like that is the best way to work.
Yeah, no, and I just kind of love that, just like teaming up with the locals and working that way. And I think one of the things that I would love to just maybe like hear a little bit more about is like this means there must be this great sense of like trust, and like that you trust these people, you trust these communities, and like, because you're just like completely like, you're in Boone, North Carolina, and you just have to trust people. And I guess like for you, what is like trust? Like, how is your trust growing, I guess, in like your personal life or even in relationships, of just like trust is like now this like center point of wine to water. Like you trust these people to do the work that like you've invited them to.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that, man. Like the 2020, I think for everybody, was a pressure test on trust. Right. And so even for us as an organization, we have field teams, and I'm used to being able to hop on a plane and go spend 2 weeks with people, and been on Zoom calls for forever. Right. And to your point, unless you have established trust, and I mean that in the like nth degree, then you've got nothing, and so for us, yeah, that is a cornerstone. That relationship side, no work can happen until we have that relationship and trust established. And for me personally, it's just been an education in itself around the value of investing time, energy in people. I'll say, like, one of the things that's interesting that I've always kind of shared with our staff here as I've grown in my responsibility here is, one of our previous CEOs was here, and he said, this is when I was overseeing just our international programs, and I was trying to get personally, like, my relationships built, right, and figure out, how do I manage this, right? And as a humans, we often are like, we want to hold it tight, and ensure that everything goes well, and he was like, hey man, just get on the plane. And I was like, but I got to figure out, like, what do I need to do? And like, what's the need and what's going to be the purpose? And he's like, don't worry about that. Just get on the plane, man. And that coming back, over time is like, even when you can't get on the plane, it's just like, you got to invest in getting on the phone or shooting that message out and investing in that relational side, because unless that's strong, your program, the wealth, that whatever it may be, is just not going to stand up. And so for me personally, I struggle with it because I'm maybe a control freak a little bit. But that trust piece, they never disappoint, to be honest with you. And knowing that is where your time investment should be from a majority sense, it's a constant reminder. And I think something that we in 2020 had to double down on. Mm-hmm. And, last thing I'll mention here is we built that trust over 5 years. 2020 hit. And I'll tell you, our teams in the DR and Tanzania in 48 hours went from producing ceramic water filters to producing hand washing stations. Not by my idea. They just did it because they saw the need and they knew that we trusted them to move and act and serve. Same thing in Nepal. They pivoted within 48 hours from doing community work to working solely in COVID wards and doing sanitation and hygiene work. And it wasn't hey, we want you guys to do this, we're going to roll out the strategy. They just did it. And it was because we had built that well of trust over the last 5 years. And they knew that if they acted and were, protagonists of change, then we would be behind them. And so to me, like, that's sort of the most beautiful thing in some ways. Like, this 2020 has been a reminder of it's worth it. Keep investing daily in that process, and it will come back tenfold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just want, like, our listeners here today, just like to think about your organizations, the places you work, like if you work with the poor, or if you work with coworkers, like how much do you trust them? Like, how can you grow in that trust of working with your coworkers? I think like that relationship, because I think at the end of the day, like we need, like, we're not independent creatures. We're called to be in community, and to trust one another and build that relationship is key. And I think, even just in like your faith journey, like how do you trust in the Lord, and like how do you trust in God and just continue to grow in that trust? And like part of it's like you have to like just do it and just let it happen and like, be present. And I think like that's just, I think, a really powerful thing that I hope that our listeners can really take away from that. And maybe even just think of like, how do I restructure like an organization? If you're in charge of an organization, or if you ever become in charge of one, to be built on relationship and trust, and not on like the power that I have as an organization or the power of as a person to make sure all these things get done, to do it with people, especially those that you might see as like different or more marginalized. Like that trust to work in the team with them, I think it's life changing. I think, and I invite everyone to just kind of think through that of like, imagine if you were to team up with people experiencing homelessness here in Houston and be like, hey, I want to build a team of homeless people that will bring food to their brothers and sisters. And like, I don't know how that would happen right now, but like, there's a trust that you can build in relationship with them to find ways to let them be a part of this work with it. And I think, I'd love to see like this change to just like, hey, we're not the ones that's always giving, like we know the answers, like let's let them be a part of it too. And I think that would be really beautiful to see. But Josh, I love all these topics you're talking about, but one of the things that I just like always wonder is just like, you're talking about all these great things and all these awesome work that y'all are doing, but what does like a day in your shoes look like in the office? And I know like some days might be boring, but like, what does it look like for you?
Yeah, it's like a spectrum, right? And, I would say probably everybody is in the twilight zone of Zoom this past year. And I'll say that I'm right there with you. Like, we've had so many Zoom calls, both internally. I mean, even here in our US staff, we've been remote for quite some time. And so, it's certainly not glamorous by any means for a majority of the time. Like I said, we view ourselves as, our purpose is to serve our international teams. And that means ensuring that, everyone's aligned, investing in those trust relationships. And I'll just speak to that really quick. It's not sexy to do that. It's not fun. It's not the awesome thing. It's the picking up the phone. It's, just that water cooler talk that you just can't get away from. And if you have to do it over Zoom, prioritize it. And so I would say a majority of our time is that stuff, and it's sort of building and paying into that well. But I will say, and I'm looking forward to this day, when we can travel a little bit more, but there's also those days where, I get to sit down, in the Amazon jungle with our Colombian team and hop on a boat and drive out to, row out to a community that, has just gotten pretty massive. Santa Lucia, for example, is a community working in right now. And they have a big water tank coming in and they're actually piping the water out to the community. And I've been down to the Amazon region 100 times, I feel like. And our team down there, Johnny Anderson, the country director, and Jonathan and Anna Maria, it's just such lovely people. And, those days look like sitting there in a beautiful place, even though you're getting bitten up by mosquitoes, and watching people, I think, be their best selves. It's just it's amazing, right? And so, I want to say, for example, with Johnny Anderson, I've watched him 100 times do trainings in front of communities. Now with some of the filters actually that you guys are going to be a part of. And it's one of those things where, those days when you get to watch somebody live in their element and just be what they were born to be, that makes all the other Zoom calls and all the budget sheets and all the stuff, worth it. And I'm ready to go do 1,000 more of those just to get one more of that, amazing experience in one of these places. So, I'd say a majority of it's the former, but I'm looking forward to the latter in the future, and it makes it all worth it.
It's really cool. No, that sounds awesome. I think a lot of people don't understand this work. You got to put in a lot of time to have this big moment. And it's even and even in campus ministry, it's a lot of Zoom meetings, and we had this big retreat that grabs people, and it's really awesome. Or we do all these meetings and we go to Jamaica or do something like that. And I think it's just, it's a lot of things. And I think after college, or if you're out of college now, that you experience this now. And then there's this one moment. And I think that definitely kind of resonates with me, and I hope probably everyone else too. But one thing I thought was interesting too, and I think we won't dive into this, but you're talking about this Amazon region, and I'm sure you've seen how the world has changed around this Amazon region, and Pope Francis even has recognized this too. And he wrote this encyclical last year, I believe, about the Amazon region and how we as a church need to find a new way to engage with this Amazon region, because their ecosystem, their spiritual life and everything has completely been decimated. And I think we need to find a way as a church to enter into a new relationship with the Amazon. And maybe it's partnering up with an organization like Wine to Water and hearing more about the work that they're doing. But we as a church need to do something. And I think, and I know it seems very far from us, but if the Amazon disappears, I don't know what else will happen. But we won't dive into that. But what I do want to talk a little bit more about, just for the sake of time here, is you're talking about all these awesome opportunities. It's a very niche, water, clean water, really unique opportunity that you fell into and that you've been working into. But you didn't just end up there. How did you get there? You said you started this in your college experience. A lot of our listeners are college students. So what did that look like? And then how did you get to where you are now? Because I think if you can show them a path, I think that'd be an awesome way of showing you can take your passions and desires and care for the world and end up where you are at the same time.
Yeah, no, I'd say, man, it started with a sinking feeling of I don't know what I'm going to do, and sitting in that, and being really wrestling with that. So I tell anybody listening who's who's living in that space of that, their guts just churning, and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I want to do something, but I don't know what it is. I'll tell you, good. You're in a good place. I know it's really challenging, but that is the first step. And it's a good thing that you have that wrestling. I personally was in that place, and I'll say, my faith journey, I grew up not in the Catholic Church, but in the Christian church and some different denominations, or not just Christian, but different denominations than the Catholic church. And for me, what it was for me was sort of like this wrestling of like, this faith is so central to me, but I want to go further. I want to be a part of something that's tangible, or that I can be a part of. And I had some more questions than answers. And the thing with Wine to Water that struck me, and obviously with Doc's story and sort of our name, is, this idea that Jesus' first miracle was turning some really, really, really dirty water into some awesome, the best wine. And that the sole purpose for it was not to like help somebody, more so than it was just helping them to keep a party going and to celebrate. And I thought that was just so beautiful and something that I wanted to like live out in my own life. And, as I got into Wine to Water as a student, I literally just showed up, it's cliche to say, but half the battle is just like showing, or more 90% of it's just showing up. And so I would encourage people, just show up, like take that first step, even if it's scary. And it may be at the campus ministry, it may be at the soup kitchen or whatever. Or it may be at that internship for that corporate job that, you're not sure if you want to like or not. You won't know until you know. And so for me, it was showing up at an interest meeting. And what I realized as I started to talk to these people was at Wine to Water at the time was there's this mentality of everyone has a seat at our table. And that resonated with me. It's like when Max said, you don't have to be perfect to be a part of this. That was sort of the saving grace for me. And for me, like that idea of like, yeah, I still have the gut feeling, I still have the wrestling, but I can be here now and be a part of this. I'll say it never went away. It's still there. And it's just a constant taking that step forward and the next thing. And so if you got the wrestling, I'd just say take that first step and try and figure out what it is and be okay with a couple of them not working out. I personally can say that that's been a part of my journey as well. But, Wine to Water has been always one of those places for me personally that has been a seat at the table. And we like to say there's always a seat for others. So we've got an internship program. We have a chapter program, both professionally, I will say, as well as, still the college level. We have an ambassador program. So if you're interested, we'd love to have you. We got a seat at the table for you. But I'd also say water's not for everybody either. And you guys may have something that is more passionate to you. I just say, take that step, go for it. You won't be disappointed.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I know. I always try to tell students, like, you're never going to like your vocation, like where you're being called, like you have to go out and serve and like experience these things to truly know if that's where like your heart's on fire, you're experiencing joy there, and like your gifts are being used in that way. And I think like that, just like go and try these things, like go out there, you have this time now, go and try like all different things to figure out, hey, it's this where I feel this like passion or this fire inside my heart. And is this where the Lord's calling me to like do this work? And I think, I think that's a great example of just kind of like, you just got to do it, y'all. You just got to take that step. So I know our students, and you kind of been hinting at this, that like we're about to get these filters. And I know we're teaming up with Wine to Water around World Water Week, our World Water Day, and we're going to try to turn into a week experience for us on the campus of University of St. Thomas. We're getting ready to get filters down here. Could you kind of explain like what that's going to be, like what that experience will be like? And then like, what does it do? What's the impact of it too?
Yeah, sure. So we have this filter program where you guys will all get bags. There'll be like, I think it's roughly 13 pieces in this bag. And the filter itself is based on kidney dialysis. It's a micro membrane filter. And we use it in responses like Nepal relief and other places. But what you guys will do is sit down and put it together. It's not going to take a lot of time, but it saves us so much time. Because if we got all these parts and had to put everyone together that we're going to go send to Nepal, we wouldn't be ready for that next earthquake or that next thing. So what you guys are going to do, and even the short amount of time that you're going to do it in, is hugely helpful to us. The other thing I'd say is there's a couple things that you'll also have in the bag, which are integral to what a lot of we've been talking about. There's a little note card that's going to be in there, and we call it a field note. And we want you guys to write a note to that person that's going to receive that filter. It doesn't have to be a manifesto of something amazing and these inspiring words. It can be anything from just, hey, I love you, or hey, I'm thinking of you, or a heart, an image. I can tell you, I've seen it in Cuba when we've done stuff. Like churches that got filters down there actually wrote back to the people who built the filters. And so again, it's going back to, it's not all about the filter. It's about the relationship and the community that comes out of it. And to your point, Max, like we're communal beings. And so we want to use this program and what you guys are going to be a part of to become members, part of this bigger thing that we have as an organization. So you're going to put that stuff together. You're going to send it back to us, and we're going to get to somebody who needs it. But we're excited for you guys to be a part of it, and we can't wait to connect with you guys once we get them out into the field and to somebody's hands that need them.
Awesome. Thank you. No, that sounds awesome. Looking forward to the opportunity. And my final question for you today is, and it ties into this podcast, is lastly, could you answer how you are being a protagonist of change now?
Yeah, I would say that for us as an organization right now, front and center is honestly our response in Texas right now. You guys have been through a tough few weeks. And so right now for us, this comes back to always leading or clarity through action. There's oftentimes not knowing what the right step is. And it means that there's multiple steps you can take. And so for us as an organization, constantly being on the front end of change and embracing it. And so for us right now, we're actually sending about 250 filters to the Houston College Station area and to some of the harder hit regions that may be behind even on getting their water back. And we're partnering with some local volunteers there to get filters into folks' hands that need them. And we'll see where it goes from there. We don't know if that means we'll do more work or if we need to partner up with other folks. But we're really trying to, again, be protagonists of change and embrace it. And to me, when I hear that, I hear embracing the new, embracing the unknown, rather than trying to define what I know and then be comfortable. So I love the name, and that's what we're trying to do right now to ensure that we hold true and stay accountable to that.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. And I'm looking forward to just getting the team up more and hear more about how University of St. Thomas can become a collaborator, a protagonist of change with Wine to Water. So thank you for your time today, and everyone enjoy this interview, and peace out, everyone.
Pleasure.
If you made it this far, thank you for sticking with us. This whole project is a labor of love, but we want to hear from y'all. What does water mean to you? Let us know. Hit us up on social at Cal Campus Men and at Max Studios UST on Instagram and Facebook. Share this with your friends, family, coworkers, and classmates. And every time you take a sip of water, take a moment to think of those in need. And a special thanks to Josh for taking the time to talk with us today. You've been listening to Protagonists of Change, a Max Studios production. I'm Max Linville, and until next time, peace out.